How about three body yawns, three pendiculations to reset our systems into listening and receptivity? So three mighty yawns and following the expression of how that yawn animates you. And after those three yawns, if there's anything left, any wiggles, any bounces, any stretches, any rolls that your body is asking for, go ahead and allow for those to come through. Just remember that while we're together today and while we're participating with Carol's lecture here in the beginning, that you always have the choice to move, to shift, to take another posture, to stretch, okay? So that you're staying present with what your body needs while we're also learning together today. Thank you all so much for being here. What a true gift. I'm excited to introduce you to Carol Davis. I believe that I met you, Carol, in 2018, 2019 through the Embodied Biotensegrity group. And I was really struck by Carol because she had such a kind of mighty presence in the circle, such a good listener. And then when I realized several kind of months later that she was also like one of the teachers in the space, I was really taken back because of how much allowance you always gave the rest of us to kind of learn and stumble about in the world of biotensegrity and really supported us exploring where we were in our own learning curve. And so with that, I'm going to hand this over to you, Carol.
Thank you, Kaila. Good morning, everyone. I'm coming to you from Scarborough, Maine on a Sunday morning, soon moving into afternoon, about 10 after 11 in the morning here. This is northeastern Maine. Kaila and I are separated by 2/3 of the United States, 2 time zones, but it's very nice to be here. Just as a little background for you, I am a physical therapist, but I've been doing this for a long time, and probably one of the organizing drivers of my curiosity was not so much my learning in physical therapy as it was being born an identical twin and sharing that extra sensory perception with another person on the planet who often was confused. We were confused as the same person. She had some international and national presence as well, and I got on an elevator in a strange hotel someplace, and someone castigated me for not being friendly, and of course they thought it was my sister. And I said, "You think I'm Susan, don't you?" And they said yes, and I said, "Well, that's my sister. I'm Carol, and I apologize for not being as friendly as my sister is." But a lot of what I'm going to be talking with you about this morning has to do with my urge to understand what about this connection with my sister can be shown to be scientifically valid. Because I was educated as a scientist, I have a master's degree in science. As I was learning physical therapy, and especially neuroanatomy, neurophysiology, but I realized quite early on that those were not answering my questions, and I had to, especially the questions of therapeutic presence that we're going to be talking about today, and the relevance of that in my patient care as a very dynamic tool for facilitating healing. And so I began studying what about this connection between me and my sister, between myself and my patients, myself and my students. what can we say about it, and what can we do about it? And that's the article. It ended up as a dissertation for doctoral work. And an article that was written from that is, what is empathy, and can empathy be taught? And Kaila has made that available to you, I believe, online, so that you can read that. That actually comes from the dissertation work I did in the 1970s and 1980s, quite a while ago. But it stimulated me to re-look at this science that I learned, this linear science that I learned when I graduated in 1969 from physical therapy. And I began a quest. And I have been pulling together and always learning along the way, over 52, 53 years of what meaning this has for me in facilitating healing. And so what I'm doing this morning is presenting to you the science as I understand it, with all of its incompleteness and all of its suppositions, because there's so much about this science that we can't measure directly. It's inferred by the action of things, of particles that we've never seen. And yet we know it's affecting us. You know it's affecting you. You know that you felt different after you did the pandiculation and the yawn. Something happened in your body that opened up, as the way often that we look at it. And I'm going to be talking about fascia, the marvelous web, biotensegrity, the energy that courses through it, resonance, that connecting of the energy, and empathy, and what it means to our patient care and client teaching to facilitate healing. I will be coming from many years as a manual therapist. I'm a myofascial release therapist. I studied with John Bards, and I'm particularly interested in the energetic link between what happens when I place my hands on soft tissue and what do I feel happening under my hands. But I also am very cognizant of the power of motion and embodied motion, particularly in bringing about change to this tissue that we can feel, that we may not be able to measure directly, but that we can feel. And so what I'd like to do is present the science as I understand it about each of these categories. And it's a lot of information. It will be available to you to look at as a recording. If you're not quite getting it when I'm going through it, you can come back to it, and then we will have time for discussion at the end where you can ask me your questions. If you would, write down questions rather than using the chat or the Q&A. Write them down, and then we can talk about them at the end, okay? So that's, I think, all you need to know about me. I've worked as a clinician for many, many years, and then I worked as an academic for many, many years. I was most recently at the University of Miami, and I retired in 2015 as a professor. And I'm still associated with the faculty as a professor emerita. But I see myself primarily as a clinician researcher who brings alive science in clinical practice and writes about it so that other people can hopefully understand science a little bit more fully as you're bringing your practice alive with your patients, clients, students, whatever. So I call this the science of fascia, biotensegrity, resonance, and empathy. Quite a lot of material. So let's get started. The key questions that drove my outline in thinking about how I wanted to present this: what do we know about fascia, structure and function? And we can know this. We don't have to conjecture about it. We've got endoscopic, microscopic, confocal microscopy now. We've got technology that tells us what we are reporting about fascia. Some of what I'm going to report this morning is proposals and beliefs and ideas and conjecture, but some of it is very easily and well documented, proven. And what we know about fascia is pretty well documented and proven. The interpretation of what's documented and proven is varies from school to school, person to person. What is biotensegrity, and how do we know about that? What is it and how do we know about it? How do fascia and biotensegrity work together? I can't separate them anymore. Fascia and biotensegrity to me are as much together. You can't take them apart and have any meaningful understanding of what's happening inside of us. And how do they become the foundation of life? What is energetic resonance? We use those terms, energetic. We use resonance a lot, I think, at least in English. We use resonance to resonate with someone, to align and agree. We'll look at energetic resonance in the physics perspective, again, not conjecture. How does resonance contribute to empathy? Somewhat conjecture here, but we're going to talk about what we do know and what we then propose. And then how do empathy, resonance, and embodied movement impact fascia and biotensegrity? And here on the right, you see the microscopic, the endoscopic view, 10 times magnified from Jean-Claude Guimbarteau. It's really not an accurate view because it looks as though there are empty spaces here between the tubule-like, fiber-like structures. All of this is filled with viscous fluid. So all of this should be like this, filled with viscous fluid. This is air that got in through the endoscopic view. It's important to bring that about because this is an illustration that is erroneous, interpreted the wrong way. And the major theses of the presentation are that holistic healthcare with integrative therapies is one model of best practice that's attracting more interest. One model. There are several models. The scientific basis of this approach of integrative healthcares to healing is grounded in an up-to-date understanding, and we're constantly reading, and new research is coming out every day, an analysis of the structure and function of fascia and biotensegrity. Most of what we believe about fascial response is not yet proven because we don't have the technology, but is based on in-depth analysis and belief. Many are coming to believe that all life is made possible by way of the dynamic biotensegral flow within the living, semiconducting, liquid crystal matrix of fascia. And this is James Oshman's view, and more people are now contributing to that research. Dynamic biotensegral flow within the living, semiconducting liquid crystal matrix of fascia from head to toe. And all therapies, we believe, those of us who hold these ideas, rely on fascia and biotensegrity for their successful application to foster this body-mind coming back into balance. And that's what we see as healing, coming back into balance. So we start with a picture of what fascia is not. This is the fascia that I learned in cadaver dissection in 1967 in physical therapy school. And we were told to get rid of that white stuff that's hiding all the important things, the muscles, the nerves, the bones, and the circulatory system. And so we got rid of all the fascia, threw it in a bucket so that we could look at the pectoralis major, we could look at the pectoralis minor, we could look at the sternum, we could look at the triceps and say, oh, this is what's really important because this is what moves us. We didn't understand that which we threw into the bucket was helping those muscles move, and without it, the muscles cannot function. So here is Jean-Claude Guimbarteau's Strolling Under the Skin. And I show this to all of my patients before I put my hands on them. I say, what you're going to feel under my hands is this fluid system that's responding to the energy coming out of my hands, we believe. And if one hand is above and one hand is below here on this screen, I'm impacting through elongation, opening up this tissue. You can see the tissue moving, and there is what we call a release. We don't know exactly what a release is, but we see fascia allowing itself to be manipulated through manual pressure and compression and elongation on the skin. And that together is really the most important part about what we understand about fascia. That is, fascia allows us to change it in its structure and function, and therefore bring about changes that we believe contribute to healing, to balance and healing. And here we have two diagrams. One is Barnes' diagram of showing fascia going from head to toe, and all of every cell is embedded in this. And then James Oshman's beautiful diagram of cells are not bags with bags inside. They are very dynamic. Here's the extracellular matrix and the integrins and the energy coming in from the fascia into the nucleus of the cell, affecting the DNA of the nucleus. We don't know how many cells are in the body. Nobody's ever measured them, but we know there are at least 35 trillion cells inside the body, embedded, not surrounded by, like with saran wrap, embedded within the extracellular matrix, like a thread is embedded into cloth in a embroidery. The cell and the cloth become intertwined, and they work together within the extracellular matrix or fascia. And for anything to get into or out of the cellular membrane, it has to flow through the fascial matrix. And here's another diagram of this. Here's the matrix up here with emphasizing the fluid, the water content, and then the integrins, the beta barrel that goes through the bilipid cell membrane. Here's the cell membrane. Here's the extracellular matrix, and here is the protein connector for energy and fluid and glucose and so forth to get from the matrix and this and the everything that needs to get inside the cell goes through it this way, has to go through the fascia first, into the cytoplasm, the cytoskeleton, down into the nucleus. This is a wonderful film. I recommend it to you. It's called the life of a cell, the inner life of a cell. Write that down, inner life of a cell, and go on YouTube and watch it. It is fantastic. It is done by the Pixel group, trying to get more students interested at the college level on cellular dynamics. And here is, to me, my mentor and a beacon of information and light, James Oshman, Energy Medicine, the Scientific Basis. This is my go-to manual for looking up the research that points to what we know about fascia and biotensegrity. And at the foundation of it, vibration. Vibration is the key to life, because all matter is composed of atoms. Everything on our planet and in the cosmos is composed of atoms, and all atoms vibrate. So everything at its foundation vibrates. Electron, photon vibration is the key to all flow. And whenever we have energy, we've got flow. All cells respond to this energy. The breath, the blood, nerve transmission, muscle contraction, neurotransmitters and neuropeptides, the fluid nervous system that I didn't even know about when I went to PT school. We didn't know. We thought it was the brain and spinal cord and the peripheral nerves, and that was it. But now we know there's a fluid nervous system, a communication system that goes through the fascia to get its messages to the cells of what to do next and when. Cytokines, little messenger molecules that tell the fibrinogen to come and help close a wound right away, very, very fast. They flow very rapidly, faster than the speed of light. through the fascia to the open wound to get the scar to start healing. Cytokines, steroids and hormones, fluids that tell our body, that are regulating body flows, and the systems that are working together for homeostasis. And also what we can't measure directly, but everybody has felt that, the power of thought to change our biology. The power of thought. Of course, behind this is placebo, behind scientific studies. But we also know that, for example, hyperacidity in the stomach is due in large part to anxiety, and a hyperacidity of anxiety that is due to thought, anxious thoughts. Thoughts very much affect our biological homeostasis, dynamic homeostasis in every moment. And then before all the flows, and here's a diagram of a wave coming out of the ocean. Before all the flows, this push-pull, tension, compression of biotensegrity, biotensegral flow, flowing through the fascia. And I like to see this as the flow of chi, of prana, the original foundational energy flow throughout our whole system. But nobody has ever seen an electron flowing. And so what we have to do is conjecture about this. And this push-pull, tension, compression, we can see the results of it. And I'm going to show you some dynamic films that show you the result of biotensegral flow. But David Bohm, the great physicist, conjectured, we made a mistake when we separated the world into parts. Everything it is like a vast ocean. And out of the ocean comes a wave. And on the tip of the wave is froth. Well, that tip of the wave, the froth, is really so much less than the whole, but it's what we can see. It's like what we can see. And so the metaphor is that the tip of the froth, excuse me a second, is like the explicate order, that which we can explain. Nope, I don't want that yet. That which we can explain, that explicate order, that foam there. The wave that the foam comes from is like the implicate order, that which is implied, though everything that is either, in any one moment, is either that we can see and measure, is the 4%, is either a particle or a wave. And when it's a wave, we can't see it. It's a thought. But a thought eventually becomes something that we put together, whether we're artists or inventors or whatever. And that thought is implied. But so we have the explicate order, the 4%, the froth, the wave coming out of the ocean, that's the implicate order. But the energy that it all stems from, the wide, vast ocean in this metaphor, is the super implicate order, the origin of all energy. And Bohm said that's a good metaphor for all that is in this holistic universe. And biotensegrity can be seen as this source of energy within the living structures, the science of living structures. So to try to understand this better, we go to a model, and this is the way Steve Levin, the founder of this theory, figured this all out. And I'll talk to you about that in a minute, but we go to a model here that is a model of energy flow, and it's a tensegrity model. And over to the side here, we see a fibroblast. Now, fibroblasts are the cellular manufacturers of fascia. And now we found actually also, including with fasciocytes, hyaluronic acid. But there's a fibroblast. And can you see the similarity between the cell and the model? You'll never see anything like this inside the body, but you will see this. And so we know that tensegrity is an image, a model of the dynamic forces. So this is an energy flow model. The energy of these strings or elastic bands and the energy of these rods together forming this open structure, a balanced structure that gives it volume. And they're discontinuous struts. The struts are not connected to each other, but there's a continuous tensional band that holds it all together. So it's tension and compression forces shared by both the struts and the wires to keep this structure open and stable. But you know that when you push on this strut right here, that whole system is going to move. When one thing moves, everything moves. And that's a characteristic of the tensegral model system of our biology. And when that happens, we have a holistic view rather than a view of parts put together like in a machine. Where does biotensegrity come from? Well, you can see here 3 diagrams. Conception, a diagram of, this isn't a photograph by any means, sperm fertilizing the egg, and then a zygote turning into an embryo and then developing over weeks within the womb to take shape. We are not machines. We are whole from the moment of conception, from the moment that sperm and egg unite, and that energy comes from the sperm and the egg. It's within those structures. We are dynamically energized by a force field long before the nervous system is formed. The nervous system is not yet formed here, but we are being organized by this dynamic energy that's following the DNA blueprint in all of the cells. And this force field is a continuous tension compression dynamic begun at the moment of conception. And here's a wonderful video that I'd like to show you of a salamander growing from a single cell, fueled by this energy, following the DNA within the cell itself to form the salamander. And I can't show you the whole one because we're not, the whole film, because we're not quite able. But look this up when you get a chance, Becoming, this film. One cell, divides, or Jaap van der Waal would say multiplies. So the DNA is in 2 cells, now in 4 cells. But so what's making those cells divide or multiply? What's the force? And that's the biotensegral force from the moment of conception. And now we see the system is close packed. That's what the cells are able to be close packed, communicating with each other with this dynamic bioenergetic flow. And it's starting to now shape itself. And you can see this close packing start to involute. It's going to start to turn over on itself. And then we'll start to get the formation of the tubes. And the tubes are critical to the outer and inner, the dimensional structure of this salamander. So we see the turning in on itself. And we're going to move ahead a little bit. And then we start to see this tube flowing and closing in on itself. And then you can see that there's still space here. They're getting fluid and information from there as it forms and starts to form its shape. And you can see the movement, see how dynamic it is. The limb buds, the head, and here comes the tail, being driven by and nourished by this structure here, but moving, constantly moving. And the cells are moving as well to form itself. And that energy of movement is what we now know is biotensegral energy. It's not the DNA that forms us. It is the force of the biotensegrity that forms us. And here's Steve Levin, orthopedic surgeon, now in his 90s, still teaching, was sitting outside the Natural History Museum in Washington and saw this Kenneth Nielsen needle tower. Couldn't understand, with his understanding of biomechanics that he learned as an orthopedic surgeon, how does that dinosaur that he just saw inside the Natural History Museum, how does that dinosaur hold its tail up without dragging on the ground? And it couldn't be done by a pulley system or a lever system. It's got to be something that's holding that up. Then he saw this needle tower, Kenneth Nielsen's needle tower. He said, that's it. That must be it. It's cables and wires, and struts and bones being held apart or dynamically. And as he worked it out, he realized it had to be the combination of the tension and compression holding this together, begun at the moment of conception. And it's not either the tension or the compression, but it's a combination of the two, very much as in yin yang. The yin has yang in it, and the yang has yin in it, so that it's a combination of the third force, the balance, the continuous dynamic balance of the whole. Here is Danielle Claude Martin, who talks about living biotensegrity. And here is a model, a kind of a model of a human being. It's really got more errors in it than we can count, but it gives you a basic understanding of how the tension components, if you move, if this is a high shoulder, it's going to affect the pelvis. And if the pelvis is high, it's going to affect what's going on down below. This spacious, dynamic, inner primal push-pull force within us, which responds both to forces inside of us. You saw the salamander responding to forces inside, as well as outside of us, mainly gravity, so that when we're forming in the womb, gravity is already, the ground reaction force is already impacting the location, for example, of the heart. And the heart is on an angle in the middle of the chest. It's not straight up and down. It's on an angle according to the DNA relationship and the biotenseg relationship with gravity. But that's true as fully mature adults as well. We respond to forces inside of us and outside of us, mainly gravity. And it also, fascia also, we know, responds to our touch with manual resistance. And I'll show you, it's not conjecture, I'll show you a video of that. And the shifts in this force occur as we move. And this is what embodied biotensegrity is all about. In various positions, we move, and the forces are dynamically impacting fascia at any one moment, or when we use our hands to help fascial restrictions soften or release. We're not sure what release means, but fascia changes as a result of pressure and compression from our hands. So where is the end of the web? Top of the head to the bottom. And Jean-Claude Barteau and I are involved in an interaction here in a section in Dundee with John Sharkey. And it's as if I'm asking Jean-Claude, where's the beginning? Where's the end? And he said, I tried to find where the end of the fascia was as I looked in the endoscope. And I searched, and I finally realized the fascia never ends. It's a continuous tissue. From inner to outer, you saw how we alluded, we do that too, like the salamander, from top to bottom, from side to side. There are no layers, there are densities, no layers, there are no connections. A tendon doesn't connect to a bone. A tendon, the fascia of a tendon becomes the periosteum of a bone. There's no seam. It's all one tissue. And that fascia has an awful lot to do with the formation of the cells in those tissues. It doesn't connect, it constitutes. Fascia is constitutive. So, boy, I had to wrap my head around that a little bit. This needs a paradigm shift, big time, in the science of how we live and how we're put together. So what do you see here? Usually the black comes right at us and we see the vase. But if we focus the lens a little differently and look at the white, can you see the two faces looking up to the top? And this is often used as an example of how in a paradigm shift in science, something that we now see that we hadn't seen before was always there, but we hadn't seen it. We had to shift our lenses and try looking at both at the same time. You can't. You either see the face or the vase. You either see the wave or the particle, and you can't really see the wave. You can only see the particle in quantum. And the way that gets translated in healthcare is this. We use this model of muscle and bone and nerve before as the foundational parts of how we're put together. And what we found out was we were really missing something, just like the fascia that I threw into the basin underneath the cadaver dissection table. To throw that away was to throw away the constitutive tissue that forms us, and then is the copper wire conduction system of all of the flows to every single cell in our body. And here's Alex Gray's beautiful painting of all of those flows, all of those energetic flows that are impacting cellular things that are happening within inside our cells every millisecond of every day, from the moment we are conceived until we take our last breath. We have to have a whole new view. It's no longer good enough to pretend that we're machines and made up of parts, and that all we have to do to fix the machine is either put together the broken part, or break the part that should be broken, or take out the part that's diseased and put in another part, and then we'll be the same. No, after every scar, we are changed. We are changed forever. And that change has to do with the nature of the fabric, the living, vibrating fascial web that is the foundation of life within us. So as we always looked at layers and parts, now we have to look at densities and webs and spirals. As we always before talked about biomechanics, now we talk about biomotion. There's nothing mechanical in us. We talked about stretching and shearing. No, if you look very strictly at fascia and its physiological limits, John Sharkey maintains, and I agree, to stretch is to go outside the fascia, the normal limits, to cause harm. Those are stretch marks. And to shear, to cut, means to shear apart. No, shear is not just movement, it's gliding. So we elongate, we don't really stretch. We take tissue that's folded over on itself, and with compression and tension, elongate, shape change the elastin, shape change the collagen. The collagen literally unfolds itself rather than stretching it. And we talk about opening up our hands on the diagonal to cause this tension between and compression to impact the fascial structure. We don't talk about connecting anymore and contiguity because it's continuous flow, and it's 4-bar kinematic chains that allow us to move. Now that's biotensegral jargon, but it describes how our muscles, fascia, ligaments, and tendons, those 4, work together to bring about motion. It's no longer contract the muscle, the tendon brings the bone closer to the at the elbow. No, it's much more complex than that. And Jaap van der Wal says ligaments are not static, they're dynamic. In fact, I call them dynaments, because as the muscle contracts, it expands with auxetic flow from the endomysium, paramysium, epimysium out into the fascia surrounding the muscle, into the fascia of the ligament, and the ligament and the muscle and the fascia together work according to the nervous system input to bring that element, that limb closer. But it's all working together, 4-bar kinematic chains. We don't talk about levers and hinges, we talk about spirals and continuous flow. And there's nothing linear in the body. There's nothing linear in all of nature. There are no straight lines in nature. It's a web, it's nonlinear, it's spiral. So fascia and biotensegrity form a complex, nonlinear system, a system that is guided by these principles, as all systems are. And this is systems science, systems theory. It's self-organizing. From the moment of conception, it's self-assembling. It's self-regulating. It's self-correcting. It's self-generating. It's capable of chaos adjustment, moment to moment. It is ultimate intelligence in all life systems, not just human beings, but from human beings from conception to our last breath, in every moment. All of this is taking place and being communicated throughout the whole system through that wonderful flow of information. That linear fascia is like, John Barnes says, is like a river of information that gets stopped up through condensing of the soft matter and becomes stiffer. And that energetic flow can no longer flow through. And so what we need to do is allow fascia, facilitate the change in the extracellular matrix so that fascia can open up and all of these principles, these organizing principles, can take shape. A very, very large part of what is happening in the motion of flow within the biotensegral motion is responding to sensory input. And if you learned the nervous system, you learned that there's a brain, the central nervous system, the brain, and a spinal cord, and then the peripheral nerves. And the peripheral nerves are made up of motor nerves, which actually stimulate the muscles to move. But then sensory nerves that are bringing in information from the whole up the spinal cord, mainly through the spinal thalamic tract, up to the thalamus of the spinous of the brain, and up to the sensory motor cortex. And then the brain figures out, what is the sensation asking for from me? But we ignored or didn't pay enough attention to that there's a whole nother sensory system at work here. That's the interoceptive nervous system. That's the automatic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. Some of it is putting us in touch with, the sensory system is putting us in touch with bodily feelings. And some of it is, that's the somatic part of interoception. But some of it is putting us in touch with our emotions. And that is affecting very much the fascia and our health of our tissue. So this diagram separates it all out. Here's the motor, just 17%. And then the vasomotor, the automatic regulation of the sphincter valves and so forth. And then the other sensory, which is separated into the unmyelinated, which are the interstitial free nerve endings. They're mostly the interoceptive. And then the myelinated, which are spindles. And then the proprioceptive sensory nerves. Excuse me a second. As you look at this, all I want you to get a sense of is those free nerve endings. Those free nerve endings have everything to do with what's happening as we work with biotensegral energy. And there are 7-to-1 to proprioception. Proprioception gives us the information of where we are in space. Vestibular tells us where we are in relation to gravity. But the interoceptive, the interstitial nerve endings are right below the surface of the skin. And of course, the dermis and the subdermal tissue is all embedded in fascia. And the Schwann cells and the glial cells underneath the skin in the fascia house a tremendous amount. They said, I think Robert Schleip is the one who's been talking about this, and Katarina Fede, or Fede, if you want to look up more. The majority of sympathetic nerve stimulus comes from just under the skin, the sympathetic nervous system. And this is, of course, the driver of action, the sympathetic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic. We think of the fight, flight, or freeze with the sympathetic. The parasympathetic is the relax, the vagus nerve, and the flow to the organs and so forth. Sympathetic action, parasympathetic flow, and awareness, embodied awareness. We are driven usually by hyper-sympathetic response throughout our whole lives. We learn very early to be very, very aware of what we should be doing, what we should be afraid of, what we should be achieving. And we get into sympathetic overload. And the parasympathetic system then goes down because it has to be between the two. They balance each other. It's a polarity, either or. And so if you've got a lot of sympathetic going on, your parasympathetic, that which nurtures your organs, which allows the dopamine to flow, the feeling of relaxation, suffers dramatically. And over a long period of time, the actual hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, can fracture, and you can get dysregulation. And dysregulation of this HPA axis, from sympathetic overload and too much stress, not enough relaxation, is the foundational driver, we believe, of autoimmune problems that are the basis of all chronic illness, autoimmune problems. Okay, enough of that. Okay, so right from your website, Kaila, somatic groundwork and sensory awareness. This is all connected. With research indicating, and these are Kaila's words, with research indicating the fascial matrix is our largest sensory organ and whole body tensioning system, tracking sensation and moving with the organic impulses from our body, as in unwinding, that wonderful star unwinding that she teaches, gives new input to our brain and influences the quality of the tissue. The fascia gifts us with feeling felt, and in turn, our sensory motor system maps new possibilities. New possibilities. We learn about ourselves and how we might move in integrated fashion, much more aligned than we habitually picked up through just moving automatically. The outcome is embodied well-being or feelings of okay enough, okay enough. I'd love to hear Kaila talk about that in our discussion. So now let's shift gears a little bit to resonance, and resonance between the teacher and the student. So now we're moving out of fascia and biotensegrity and into this interaction, the energetic resonance between the teacher and the student, the science of resonance, because this is not speculative. Well, actually, some of it is. Some of it we can measure when we can see the waves. The waves we can't see, we're proposing as a belief of what's happening. And the universal life force. The universal life force is key here. The field, the field that the ocean out of which the wave comes, according to Bohm's metaphor. Key questions: what is energy? What is resonance? How do we establish resonance? And what is this universal life force? And how do we tune into this life force? And why should we? Why is it important? And how does it affect our treatment? And then out of that, how do we maintain therapeutic presence with each other? And there we have a diagram of all of the energies, and the solar plexus heart energy being, the heart energy is the strongest energy, biological energy. We can measure it all the way down on the ankles. We're a 12 lead EKG. But we can measure on the skin, and EMGs, surface EMGs, measure energy from the skin, and EKGs as well. So we know energy is in there. We know we can measure it. But how does it work together? And then how does it affect us in our field as we're working with other people with their energy fields? When we're talking about energy, remember, we're talking about all creation vibrates. The atom, everything is composed of vibrating atoms, the building blocks of our planet. Well, the density of the creative thing correlates with its some vibrational frequency. Wind is vibrating, it's almost waveform. We can measure it by turning a propeller to say this is how fast wind is going. We can't see the wind except in the movement of the clouds, but we can measure it. But a rock has a different vibrational frequency. It doesn't look like it's moving at all, but it is, because it's made up of whatever it's made up of, calcium or dolomite or whatever it's made up of. And it vibrates as well. It's on the periodic chart of the elements with a nucleus and electrons. Each cell in living structures vibrates at its own frequency. Bones are vibrating at a slower frequency than the heart and the organs. All that is in the universe that is known to us, that we can measure, is only 4%. 96% is dark to us. So we have to infer about the energy in the universe and within us. What's happening that energy is causing to move. What we're doing is looking at movement, because whenever there's movement, there's energy behind it. And there are different kinds of energy. The dark matter and dark matter energy, not the negative like Darth Vader energy, but the dark to us, the implied, the implicate, and the super implicate order metaphor. So we have potential energy, like in a battery. We have kinetic energy, the movement of the energy of movement. We have thermal energy of heat and cold. Chemical energy, chemical processes interacting with each other give off energy. And we once thought that everything that happened inside of us was as a result of chemistry. And that's how pharmacy became so predominant in our healing maneuvers. There's nuclear energy that keeps the protons and the neutrons in the nucleus and the energy field around that in motion. But when we talk about body energies, we're talking about three particular energies that are well elucidated in your references at the end of this presentation. Feinstein and Eden have done some significant work at measuring and then conjecturing about body energies, the electrical energies, the electromagnetic energies, and the subtle energies of the body. Let's take a look at those bodily energies. Well, the electrical energy of the body is the movement of electrons within and outside cells. So remember that diagram of the nucleus of the cell and then the cytoplasm and then this bilipid membrane. So electrical energy is what's behind moving the stuff through the extracellular matrix into that integrin or whatever receptor, protein receptor, is going between the extracellular matrix and the cytoplasm, and getting, for example, glucose and oxygen into the mitochondria in the cytoplasm. And then the mitochondria has to deal with that sugar and that oxygen and form ATP, energy, and hydrogen is produced. And then the hydrogen has to come outside the mitochondria into the cytoplasm and outside the cell membrane back into the fascia, the extracellular matrix. All of that is driven by biotensegral energy. And it's called cellular respiration, has a name. So if you want to understand more about that, about how cells use energy to produce the energy within and produce our inner energy, look up cellular respiration. Ions are nothing but unstable atoms. They're missing an electron and they're searching for a balancing electron. And so their movement is directed toward electrons. And so we call those free radicals. And we take vitamins actually to try to not have those free radicals damaging cell membranes to look for an electron. We take vitamin C. We take vitamin D, although that's really a hormone, and I won't get into the nutrition of it. But what we try to do is minimize the damage that can be done by ions or free radicals, that the process of oxidation within our bodies. But they carry electrical charges, and these ions, ion channels and ions drive the breath, nerve conduction, digestion, muscle activity, flow within the fascia and the blood vessels. And now electromagnetic, a little bit different. Electromagnetic is self-propagating waves that are reflected or emitted from objects, and those waves transmit energy. And we'll look at that closer in a second, but let's take a look at subtle energy. And subtle energy is electrons that we've never been able to see. It's energy known because of their effects, but they're not able to be detected. But so James Oshman says, well, how do we know they're working? So James says, well, there's been, you tap on or put a needle in an acupuncture point on the bottom of the foot, and the sensory nerves will bring that up again through the spinal cord up into the sensory motor cortex. But he said something happens faster than the speed of what's going on in the neurons. Something is flowing through the fascia much faster, and that's subtle energy, faster than the speed of light. And then you know you're in quantum. Then you know you're in the connection of ions or electrons with each other over long distances, faster than the speed of light. And this now, of course, we're getting into this kind of idea of how are my sister and I connected over vast spaces of geography. When she was pregnant with her son and didn't even know she was pregnant in Madison, Wisconsin, doing her graduate work, and I was in Birmingham, Alabama, teaching. I stopped being able to drink coffee, and I love coffee. My sister loves coffee, and we always drank brewed coffee. And one day she called me and she said, guess what? And before she said it, I knew she was going to say, I'm pregnant. And she said, I'm pregnant. I said, oh, I said, did they pull the IUD? And she said, yeah, they pulled the IUD. And I said, well, how did you know you were pregnant? And she said, well, I skipped a period, but my breast got tender and I stopped being able to drink coffee. And I said, when? And she said, about 6 weeks ago. And I had stopped being able to drink coffee. So I said, you're not going to believe this. This was after we found out we bought the same coat on the same day in 2 different cities the years before. I said, I can't drink coffee either. It gives me tremendous acid. And she said, yeah, me too. I said, well, okay, we only have 9 months of this. So hurry up and have this baby. So Jonathan came 9 months later. And I was ecstatic. I thought, oh, good, now I can start drinking coffee again. We both were drinking herbal teas, which were not bad. It was at the time when celestial seasonings were just starting to produce their teas. But anyway, Jonathan was born, but she nursed him. So it was a year and a half, 2 years. And then finally, she was able to drink coffee and I was able to drink coffee. And so what was that? What is it that when we talked in the morning together, she says, I dreamed about this. And I said, oh, yeah, I kind of dreamed about the same thing. Our dreams actually overlap. What is that non-locality, that quantum event? So anyway, enough of that. We know it happens, but we can't explain it. But look with the visible lights, that which we can see, visible photon lights. Look how small it is. We can't see radio waves, but we see the work that's done with them. We can't see far infrared. We can see near infrared. That's the left-hand part of the visible light spectrum. We can't see gamma rays. And so that's just to explain there's so much subtle energy that is at work inside of us. A lot of it coming from that photon sun impacting tissues. We know the impact of vitamin D on the hormone vitamin D from the sun, light coming through. That's why it's good to look at the sun, get out in the sun, but keep your eyes closed. But that thin eyelid will be able to send those photons through and up your vitamin D 15 minutes a day. Here we have it, Alex Gray's, again, portrait, the human energy systems. And this is a summation of everything that I've said. We have the biofield. That's this field here, the biofield that we think is very important. It surrounds and permeates the entire system and may hold and transmit information to the whole organism and gets information from the Akashic field out here. sends it into the body. This might be the system for how we get intuitive information from the field. We have the local fields. They're the vortexes that we have measured, the spiral flow here, that are central chakra spirals that permeate specific areas of the body and are interacting with the biofield and the organs, we think, the heart, the speech, the sexual organs, the intestines, the foundation here. And then we have energy pathways, the meridians that Helena Longeven has studied and that we've been talking about, correlating with the fascial planes here, the densities, and so forth. Again, this is from Feinstein and Eden, the 6 pillars, and this marvelous image from Alex Gray. But we're going to talk too about this biofield out here and the field outside of that, the Akashic field. The universal life force is often the name given to it. The 0 point field is what Lynn McTaggart calls it in her book, The Field. The Akashic field is Irvin Laszlo's description. And these are all in your references. The energy of the cosmos that surrounds us and fuels all energies, packed with energy. If we could just tap into it, we'd never need fossil fuels again. But, and we think it started with the Big Bang, out of something so microscopically small, an explosion in spirals that gravity came out of, the force of gravity, the 4 universal forces. That gravity force that formed everything. The stars were born, and the planets were born, and the cosmos was born, and everything is spiraling out from it. But this is conjecture now. We're not really quite sure. So let's come back to biotensegral energy and the conjecture about that, because we know it's working. But again, we're not sure exactly how. It's this compression and tension that's fueling this, that comes from the moment of conception, present in the embryo, before conception, and upon conception becomes the driving force of the DNA, self-evolving, self-development, self-creation, self-assembling, and so forth. The system is started through this energetic flow, a product of continuous dynamic between tension and compression energies, constantly adapting to internal and external forces, micro to macro, in the nucleus of the cell to the electromagnetic biofield action. The key to all flow, and this is a repeat, all flows, all cells respond to this energy: breath, blood, nerve transmission, muscle contraction, neurotransmitters, neuropeptides, cytokines, steroids, hormones, and thoughts, all responding to photons and electrons, subtle energy flow. And sometimes we get parallel waves, like on the left here, but sometimes we get vibration in concert with one another, like on the right. And then it's a magnification, like 2 rubber bands are twice the pull of 1 rubber band. That's resonance. And if you're in a room with a piano and a stringed instrument, so I say a cello leaning against the wall, and you bang the G string on a piano, the G string on the cello is going to resonate. It's going to vibrate. Well, when we look at the vibration between us and other people, we might start talking about therapeutic presence. And that presence that is in resonance, that is helpful, therapeutic, to that interaction being helpful to the healing process. The resonance between the therapist and client, or patient or student, depending on your role, which is fueled by the bioenergy, which is fueled by the universal life force, that infinite wisdom that came from the Big Bang. And although this force, this universal life force, has never been identified scientifically, it appears in many traditions from time immemorial and cultures, and is that which maintains life and health in beings bound by time and space, although the life force itself has no bounds, sometimes called chi, sometimes called prana, aura, bioenergy, biofield, or the biotensegral energy. Isn't that a wonderful diagram of it? That's a powerful person in the middle. Have you known people like that? Their energy just exudes a kind of compassion. And when you're in their presence, you are changed by just being in their presence. And that's what we hope will happen when we are working with our patients, that what we can do and say and embody and be can be a healing and compassionate force for change all around us. So how does that happen? Well, Richard Rohr, a Franciscan friar, has talked about pure presence, and I like that. Now, you can be an atheist or have no faith at all, and you know that this is science. You don't have to name this force as anything other than the Big Bang or a science. But there are some, myself included, and this is my bias, I attribute to that force, that Big Bang force, an intelligence and a compassion. Some scientists don't. It's totally, it's not compassionate. It doesn't have any intelligence. Everything that happens across cultures and across centuries is serendipitous. It's not even in the Jungian sense, because Jung believed there was an intelligence behind serendipity, but it is by accident. Excuse me. It's coincidence. I don't hold with coincidences. I believe that there's an intelligence, a loving, compassionate intelligence. So that you're getting my bias now as a practitioner, as a therapeutic practitioner in my history of 55 years of treating patients and reading about this. So what does Richard Rohr say? He says, when you're in a deep connection with that presence, there's a quiet leap of joy in the heart. There's no resistance, no clinging. There's a felt feeling sense of presence, and it keeps all three spaces open. And I love that because of the biotensegral openness of volume, long enough to be content with what is and willing to wait for what is to come. As therapists, willing to wait, letting go of the outcome, willing to wait for fascia finding its own way home in its own time. So the three spaces that Rohr speaks of are the heart space, a focus on conscious love, right mind, attention and intention, resulting from contemplation, gratitude, meditation, and the body alive and free of attachment to our own wounds. We have to do our healing in order to be a conduit of this energy that comes from the Akashic field or the 0 point field through us to resonate with others. This brings back energy questions. What is resonance? How do we establish this resonance? How do we establish this waves coming into concert with each other? And what is this universal life force? And how do we tune into it? And how does it affect our treatment? Well, one thing's for sure, according to this belief system, we can never not be biotensegral. We are always biotensegral beings. So if that's true, how does this impact what we do in movement facilitation? How do we maintain therapeutic presence? We come back to the biofield, this concept of that field regulation, and we start thinking about the biofield in terms of information, not just flow, but information being data, being knowledge, being a biofield flow where two people can get the Nobel Prize for the location, for the discovery of the retrovirus that causes HIV/AIDS, one at the Pasteur Institute in France and one at the CDC in Atlanta in America. Finding this retrovirus and naming it at the same time and publishing together to show that coincidence there's information that's out there that's in the biofield, I believe, and is shunted in through the fascia, and the fascia through scalar waves, according to Laszlo, faster than the speed of light, millions of times faster than the speed of light. This is Ervin Laszlo in your references, Laszlo. And the fascia kind of acts as a filament in a light bulb. The electrons are flowing up into the filament, and the filament slows it down, and it glows. And the light comes from it. The light bulb opens up. That's what fascia, according to, I'm blocking on her name right now. I'll get it in a second. The fascia slows down this information, and it's collecting in there, available to us if we direct our intuitive mind to it. If we go to sleep at night asking the question, or as Thomas Edison did, the channeler of electricity into such things as the telephone and the telegraph and the light bulb and the radio. He used to put a cannonball in his hand he asked a question, and then he'd start to fall asleep and change his mental state. The cannonball would drop, and then he'd get an insight. And all great insights, if you look into the biographies of Einstein and some of the great inventors, great insights came from this change of mental status. Anyway, the biofield regulation offers a shift from mechanical chemistry-based view to an information-based view. And this may be considered a multi-level organizational concept in which information flows within and between various levels, both inside the organism and outside. And then we have a conversation inside the body. And the cytokines, the little information molecules, messenger molecules, whispering, interleukins whispering to cells and other units of life, critical to sustaining life and promoting healing. This might be considered the language of life, this information coming in from the biofield. There's Shamini Jain, Jain. Write that down if you're interested in learning more about biofield impact on health and healing. Shamini Jain, I believe it's in the references. And again, Feinstein and Eden. So now let's focus on interoception and that sensory awareness of our somatic sense, our body sense, but our emotions as well. And in embodied biotensegrity, we're looking to the felt sense, the interoceptive nervous system, the free nerve endings within the fascia that integrate all nerve signals from within the body, whether we're aware of it or not, directing our understanding of body state, of our internal organs, emotional state, our affective sense. You can have pain without suffering. Suffering is the emotional state. And then the core of our very sense of self, the science of selfhood, the threshold of consciousness, perhaps. What is consciousness? Well, that's another presentation. So we have physiology and emotions and mental life dynamically coupled into the central and autonomic nervous system, interacting continuously in the insula and in the sensory motor cortex, with higher cognition and emotions acting on each other with a constant physiological adjustment to this changing environment of fascia and biotensegrity. So we used to focus on proprioception and muscle spindles and what we can feel about where we are in space. Now we're saying, no, interoception is the key. We move from the figuring it out of proprioception, left brain, into the feeling sense, the insula, interoceptive, right brain. And tuning into that therapeutic presence is how we use the interoceptors. And Traeger suggests, the founder, Morton Traeger founded the Traeger movement. Traeger says, when you want to tune in to that flow from the biofield, focus on sensation in the moment. Get out of your left brain and ask, can you feel the impact of the air on your limbs? Can you feel the weight of the air? That immediately gets you to go inside. And John Barnes says, shift from proprioception to interoception, right brain. Recognize you're changing. You're going from your diagnosis or your evaluation, you're trying to put together what you're seeing into a moment of connection and drop down into the feeling state within your body and focus your attention on what's happening if you're a manual therapist under your hands between you and your client or patient, energetic flow, and feel with intention to help. Energetic flow fueled by the heart. And recognize that you're about to cross a threshold into this moment of connection that Richard Rohr talked about, dropping down into feeling within your body, which is what Kaila teaches consistently in her course. And we get something like embodied self-awareness, that meditative, transcendent state with deep listening, aware of the flows within, observed motion in the other, and surrendering to a greater understanding of the moment. And that surrender is captured so well by Philip Shepard that I'll tell you in just a minute, an intuitive sense from inside here of how to proceed now with the other. And what's happening between you and your client or patient, that energetic flow, and feel with the intention to help flowing from the center of your heart. And if you have that intention, that will focus your attention. And how we attend to ourselves and others can be health promoting or harmful. Conscious intention to infuse attention with mindfulness qualities, generosity, openness, gentleness, empathy, loving kindness, rather than trying to figure out or needing to be perfect or judging the way something's happening. No, get out of that space and be attentive with openness and gentleness. And of course, all of this is developed through regular meditation. And Shapiro and Schwartz say, and this is in your references, through directing intention toward the mindfulness qualities, generosity, openness, gentleness, and systemic, holistic system perspectives, a more accepting, compassion, and systemic approach is brought to self-regulation and health. And Fascia invites us to assist in reorganizing efficiency in the moment. Soft touch and movement can improve compliance and hydration of that glucopolysaccharide type 2 ground matrix. The condensed dehydrated gel we call fascial, Barnes calls fascial restrictions, acts as a dam, he says, to a dam in the flow of information. Remember, the information's coming in through the biofield available to us. But what we do impacts dramatically. And for those of you who are manual therapists, I love to use this. This is Richard Hardy's myofascial release under an infrared camera. And this is a camera that's measuring temperature. The lighter the color, the higher the temperature. And you'll see the camera is measuring the temperature. And that right here, it's 89.8 Fahrenheit. But you'll notice his fingers are cooler. And you'll notice that up in the head, this is a lot of activity going on, a lot of energetic activity. And there's a lot of heat being given off here, 94 point, so forth. But now we're going to come back down, and we're going to come back down to the knee. And we're going to be on the above and below the knee. And all he is placing his hands, and the energy flowing from his hands, out of his hands, the infrared energy and the electrons flowing out of his hands are going to be changing the structure and function of the fascia underneath the skin. You notice his fingers are no longer at 1 minute and, or 4 minutes, sorry, 4 minutes and 12 seconds are no longer purple. They're warmer, but look how warm his arms are. The energy coming from his body down into the limb itself. But you can see the energy under his hands is much, much warmer than outside his hands. But he hasn't done anything. He's just placed his hands with compression and elongation, and the energy is doing the work. The energy is doing the work. This is the paradigm shift. You don't have to get in there and get real deep and loosen up that patella and rip at those cross links of the fascia. The energy is literally melting, as James Pollock says, melting the polysaccharide ground substance. It's becoming thinner through piezoelectricity and thixotrophy. These are the scientific processes that are taking place here that are changing the density of that extracellular matrix from stiff to more compliant. And I really wanted to show you that as manual therapists, of course, what's happening with our hands. But now let's see what's happening when two people are aligned in movement. And I'll tell you the story about these two people in just a minute. It's Petra and Niles, and this is Dancing with the Stars. And they're going to be doing the tango. This is movement. Here, they're connected to each other, so they're sensing through the skin. But watch what happens now as they do their dance. And I'll tell you a little bit about them. And let me get the sound up here. Look at the synchrony, the flow between them. That's resonance. Now Niles is deaf, and now he's blind. So he's totally counting on the energy and the tactile sensation from his wife, Petra. So, biotensegrity. Every time I see it, I tear up. That resonance, that connection between the two of them. He's deaf. He couldn't hear the music. But he, of course, memorized, as all dancers do, memorized the choreography. But then his wife put the blindfold on. And so he counted on totally, even when they were separated from each other, the energetic resonance bringing them back together. And that's biotensegrity between fascia and biotensegrity form a complex system, self-organizing, self-assembling, self-regulating, self-correcting, self-generating, capable of chaos adjustment, moment to moment, ultimate intelligence. And between the teacher and the student, always the student is central to our process. Being with rather than fixing, embodied awareness on the part of the teacher and the student, self-emergence, self-organization linked to intuitive sense, teacher and student part of a system, as Kaila had us look at the space between us in the opening session, and then see if you can pull that space together into one whole system. Within system dynamics, everything is connected. Sensations, forces are information into the connected systems. Language is very important. The brain knows nothing of muscles. Movement is key. And resonance is the key to connection and flow, leading to balance. And these are Kaila's words from her website. Movement is a tonic medicine that is self-correcting, self-organizing, non-invasive, and accessible. Embodied movement practice restores body-mind harmony and connects us to our lived experience. By its nature, movement is medicine, is complementary physically, mentally, and spiritually, and not contradictory to any other healing modality or belief system. And now, I bring you to Philip Shepherd and his statements in Radical Wholeness. This book, look, you see the murmuration of the starlings on the cover, how they're resonant with each other in the movement. Embodiment, Shepherd says, is a state in which your entire intelligence is experienced as a coherent unity, attuned to the world. Embodiment and paying attention to the part of you we call the body is about fully inhabiting the intelligence of the body and attuning to the world through it, through our interoceptors. It's about listening to the world through the body. It's about feeling the world through the breath. But allow the center of your awareness to descend from the penthouse suite and merge with the thinking of your being as it lives through the sensations of the breath, so that the here and now experience of breathing is the here and now experience of you, of your embodied presence in the world. You are the breath, alert to what the world reveals. How do manual therapies and movement therapies impact fascia? Well, ChatGPT on fascial release has this to say, and I agree with it. We don't understand what a release is, but we do understand that manual therapy and movement may influence fascia through changes in hydration, blood flow, neural input, or mechanical deformation. But we don't understand how this is all working. While there's some evidence that manual therapy and movement therapies can influence the properties, thixotrophy, of fascia, the specific concept of releasing fascia remains controversial. What's really being released? You saw the movement in the strolling under the skin of the fascia opening up. And we see that, but is energy being released at that moment? People say so when they get up off the table. I feel more in touch, more at one with myself. What was released? We know in trauma work, a lot of emotions are released through the physicality of emotional expression. What is released with fascia? We're not quite sure. It's essential for practitioners to critically evaluate the evidence, to consider the individual needs and responses of their clients when incorporating fascial release techniques into treatment plans. So here we have hands-on manual therapy with this, again, piezoelectricity and thixotropy and the interoceptors conducting energy through the liquid crystal matrix and getting the movement of the information in through the system. And in movement, tensing and releasing the myofascia with rhythmic movements, pulling hydration out of the capillaries into the extracellular matrix, which lessens the stiffness of the gel and improves compliance. And then this seems to enhance cellular transmission, organizing the system so that there's a decrease in stiffness and pain, but there's an improvement in the vibration of the energy throughout the whole system, and therefore improvement in the communication, and therefore increased order, coherence, and balance. Fascia comes home to itself. And how do we connect with source energy? That Akashic field, it's Richard Rohr again. Recognize we become distracted by our egos, our pain bodies. Visualize our focus as too narrow, widen to become more spacious. Feel the weight of the air impacting on my body, and then practice dropping down into the body or heart center, your intuition, your sense of self and peace. And then develop this as a daily practice, a way of being with yourself, ideally in the morning before you have a lot of stuff happening to you, in your patient care, in your teaching, and in your life, remembering Richard Rohr's, knowing when we're there, the quiet leap of the heart, no resistance, no clinging, feeling the presence and keeping the heart space, the right mind, and the body open through that biotensegral energy, willing to wait for what is to come, letting go of the outcome. The key questions, we talked about energy and resonance, establishing resonance, therapeutic presence, the universal life force and how we tune into it, and how it affects our treatment, we believe, and how we can maintain that therapeutic presence. Here are the suggested references and readings.